Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the webinar on how to get a VA postdoctoral psychology fellowship. I'm Edgar Villarreal, and I'm the early career psychology rep for the VA section of Division 18, and we're pleased to once again co-sponsor this webinar with our VA Psychology Training Council partners. Division 18 is comprised of psychologists and trainees who work in public service settings or serve special populations like Veterans Affairs, community and state hospitals, and correctional facilities. Many VA psychologists consider Division 18 their home in APA because it's the only division with a special section for Veterans Affairs. So if you want to learn more about us, check out our website. We'll make sure to drop that link in our chat, and you will also be able to access other resources, other contexts, including the recording for this webinar and previous webinars. So just as a reminder, a couple of housekeeping issues. The panelists, of course, are here for you. We have a really great distinguished panel and they welcome your questions. We'll make sure to monitor the chat box, but we do really prefer that people use the Q&A feature on Zoom. It really does a really big favor in allowing us to sort through the questions and organize the questions. That way we can be efficient with our time and be able to allow the panelists to get through as many of your questions as possible. That being said, let me go ahead and introduce the panel for today. We've got a big panel, so bear with me. We've got Dr. Sherry Beaudrea. She is the Director of VA Advanced Fellowship in Mental Illness Research and Treatment at the Sierra Pacific Myrick VA Palo Alto Healthcare System. We're also joined today by Dr. Dana Holohan, who is the past chair of the VA Psychology Training Council and the Director of Training at the Salem VA Medical Center. We're also joined by Dr. Jamylah Jackson, who is a member of at-large for the VA Psychology Training Council and is also the co-chair of the VA Psychology Training Council Multicultural and Diversity Committee. And she's also the Director of Psychology Training at the Dallas VA. We also have today Dr. Kristin Rodzinka, who is the chair of the VA Psychology Training Council and is the Director of Training at the Dayton VA Medical Center. We're also joined by Dr. Joel Schmidt, who is the past chair of the VA Psychology Training Council and now serves as the Associate Director of Advanced Fellowship section of the VA Office of Academic Affiliations. We're also joined by Dr. Wayne Siegel, who is the past chair of the VA Psychology Training Council and is the Director of Training at the Minneapolis VAMC. Finally, we're joined by Dr. Amy Silberbogen, who is the past chair of the VA Psychology Training Council and the Director of Training of the VA Boston Psychology Postdoctoral Fellowship Program. So like I mentioned, distinguished panel, years and years of service. Thank you guys for your service to our psychology profession. And with that said, I will turn it over to you all. I will remind the audience that your your microphones are muted. We will have some initial slides available, but those are just temporary as we kind of introduce the panelists and the specific sections that they're going to speak to. Once those slides disappear, I will encourage everybody to play around with the view functions on Zoom so you can see everybody's faces, turn on your cameras, let it be as interactive as possible. I suggest people use their gallery view. But that being said, I'll turn it over to our panelists.
Thank you. I think I am going to start presenting. Can I just get a quick sound check? Thumbs up if you can hear me.
You're good to
Great.
go.
Thank you. My name is Amy Silberbogen. I'm going to be leading off today. I'm standing here in the outdoors because I have some construction going on in my house and I didn't want this important information to be impacted by lots of loud banging. So hopefully the outdoors cooperates with me. So I'm going to be starting off today talking a little bit about understanding postdoctoral training in the sequence of training, and then also why a VA postdoc. What's unique about training in the VA? And so I want to spend some time talking with you about that today, and just really want to also say thank you for taking the time to hear a little bit about VA training, this is an exciting time of the year for us as we think about recruiting our next batch of trainees. So to start, what is the purpose of postdoctoral training? It's really varied greatly over the course of years. In the past, postdoctoral training has been focused on building research skills or remediating clinical skills, or simply on accruing hours for licensure. However, in 2010, APA published the Model Licensing Act, which really highlighted the fact that trainees should be eligible for entry-level practice by the time they complete internship, and therefore should be license eligible. Some states, probably about 15 to 18, I haven't checked recently, have adopted a version of this act, whereas others have not. But this really contributed to leaders in education to begin thinking really carefully about what postdoctoral training is, what it is that goes above and beyond simply accruing hours for licensure. To this end, APIC and APA jointly sponsored a postdoctoral training summit in 2015. And the consensus coming out of that summit was that postdoctoral training is advanced competency development in either a focus area or a specialty area of practice. The field is moving towards increased specialization, and receiving postdoctoral training is a way to ensure that your skills are consistent with this move. Postdoctoral training can be formal, some of the structured training programs, which is what we're really talking about in a lot of ways today, or it can be informal, and they're both pathways can lead you to a very successful career. All VA clinical postdoctoral experiences are accredited or on a pathway towards accreditation, which provides for direct clinical hours, supervision, mentorship, professional development, and all of these factors can certainly assist someone later on with board certification or mobility across state lines. So I want to turn and talk a little bit about what's unique about training in the VA, or what's, I think, really special about VA training. Some of you might be on VA internship, so maybe you've caught, you've felt some of this or learned some of this already. But VA has just a long history of providing education and training, and in fact trains the most psychologists in the country. Education is one of the core pillars of the VA, along with research and clinical care. Within VA, and because of our unique funding, there can be a focus on education and training rather than on billable hours. Provision of supervision at many of our VA institutions is really seen as a benefit and a privilege of employment rather than a collateral duty. So people are able to focus on being supervisors in a different way than in many other private or other sites. Science drives care and decision-making within VA. There are a number of evidence-based psychotherapies within just a diverse range of clinical presentations, PTSD, substance abuse, insomnia, etc. And this experience with evidence-based practice or measurement-based care, I think, is something that brings a lot of trainees to the VA. Tremendous resources have been devoted towards training and certifying providers and EBPs in order to make them widely available to veterans with mental and behavioral health conditions. Each facility, in fact, has a local EBP coordinator. So trainees, how do trainees benefit from that? So you all benefit from that because you're trained by certified providers. And at times, based on local availability, may have the opportunity to take those trainings yourselves, which leaves you just well prepared to treat a diverse range of presentations, perhaps get certified during your postdoctoral training year as well. I also want to highlight kind of the interprofessional experiences at VA. Within each VA is just a wide range of available clinical experiences, including inpatient and outpatient training, touching every diagnostic category, and co-located or embedded in primary care or medical specialty clinics. And along with this comes excellent opportunities for interprofessional training with providers from just a broad range of disciplines. Of course, everything is a little bit different right now, given COVID. It's hard to be embedded in a clinic right now, but certainly the hope for many of our institutions is that that's the direction we continue to move towards. And I do know that certainly interprofessional teams are continuing to meet over platforms like WebEx or Zoom or whatever, to continue to provide the highest quality of care to our veterans, which leaves opportunities for our trainees to get these advanced skills in negotiating and discussing cases with other disciplines. I want to highlight the social justice and public service work that's inherent in providing care through the VA. Training at the VA provides students with the opportunity to work with an underserved population, as veterans typically do not have, veterans served at the VA typically do not have the economic resources or other resources to seek healthcare elsewhere. So we have the opportunity to provide care to individuals who have risked their lives for our country. This is an opportunity to give back and engage in social justice or public service work, which can be incredibly rewarding. Psychologists within the VA are also engaged in multiple professional capacities. You see psychologists who are engaged in clinical work and administrative efforts, research, leadership roles, supervision, and consultation. So a trainee at a VA really has the opportunity to see psychologists engage in just a diverse range of roles and be exposed to those roles, which I think also helps the stage for great professional development and mentorship. People always want to know about, do you have to do you need to have had a VA internship to get a VA postdoc, or do you need to have had a VA practicum to get a VA internship? And I just want to directly state that it certainly is not a requirement to have prior training with the VA in order to be selected as an intern if you're a prac student, or as a postdoc, or as an employee. We have tremendous examples of that. And it's incredibly beneficial to be trained within VA. So while there is not a requirement, it can certainly serve as a pipeline as you progress through the sequence of training. And the last point that I want to highlight regarding VA training that makes it so unique is that we have stable funding. So funding for internships and postdocs comes from the Office of Academic Affiliations. It's written into the overall budget and assigned by location. Therefore, funding is very stable year to year with few exceptions. And this really allows consistency in training, commitment to training that you may not find at other sites where funding may be dependent on grant funding or dependent on billing. Or what have you. So I really want to highlight kind of that strength of our VA training programs as well. And I think I've hit the end of my part of it, and I believe I'm going to get this right this time, that I hand this off to Dr. Jackson. Am I correct?
Yes. I'll take it. Let me load up some video. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to talk with you guys today about diversity within the VA. There can sometimes be a stereotype that VA patients are a homogenous group of older men primarily, when in actuality, the VA serves a really wide range of ages, including veterans as young as in their 20s, women veterans, varied ethnic and ability groups, as well as diversity in sexual orientation and identification. One of the real strengths of diversity training in the VA is that because we're such a large organization, training directors within VA have the benefit of shared resources with others doing similar work around the country. That shared community of resources makes our programs stronger, as we have the benefit of tapping into a broad array of experiences. So we can send emails out to the National Training Director listserv and get feedback from training directors all over the country about how they're approaching different things. Multicultural training is one of VA psychology's really large priorities. Some of you may be aware of the recent OMB memos and executive orders limiting the scope of diversity training in the federal government. And so we want you to know that VA psychology internship and postdoctoral programs remain highly committed to diversity and inclusion. And in addition to that commitment, we are required to continue these efforts in accordance with our APA accreditation and our APIC memberships. So all VA training programs are required to be APA accredited and to be members of APIC, which require diversity training. So we will continue to adhere to the ethical standards for our profession, which include sensitivity and attention to issues of diversity and culture. If you have questions about a particular training program, we really encourage you to contact that program director. I'm sure they'd be happy to discuss that with any potential applicant. Within VA, we serve a really diverse population, like I mentioned, with respect to age, ability, military culture, socioeconomic status, rural populations, LGBTQ status, and more. So trainees are often surprised at the breadth of training experiences and populations with which they can work when at the VA. The comprehensive care that we offer within our system means opportunities to work with lots of populations and presenting problems like Dr. Silberbogen mentioned just a minute ago. And again, as a national organization, trainees at VA have opportunities to interface with trainees and staff around the country about common issues. There are several national initiatives that offer support and resources regarding diversity training for VA training programs. There's a national diversity listserv where staff and trainees can ask questions or share resources related to diversity topics. There are monthly diversity and inclusion forums and quarterly diversity consultation calls that really focus on a particular multicultural issue or topic. The forums are primarily geared toward discussing and sharing experiences, initiatives, or resources related to a particular topic that might be happening at a particular site. There is also a national shared site, website, that's a resource for VA training directors, and that includes different types of training modules, articles, suggestions for things like how to start a diversity committee at your site, experiential exercises that are focused on targeting awareness of a particular diversity variable, and having difficult conversations about race, among others. So there are tons of resources out there that our training directors can reference and can use to facilitate whatever local offerings they're trying to enhance or implement at their sites. We serve a really diverse population within VA and really aspire to recruit diverse trainees. VA has made concerted efforts to learn more about strategies for recruiting and retaining diverse staff and trainees. So if you're interested and passionate about diversity, VAs can be an excellent place to train. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Rodzinka, I believe.
I am ready to roll. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Let's do
So I get to start by talking about one of those questions that has no right answers, so bear with me a little bit. And I want to start by talking about how to consider which programs you want to apply to, maybe based on the range of competitiveness. Often there's a lot of anxiety about what do I need to think about. Right now, I think what I would say is that the market for postdoctoral fellowships is generally good. While supply and demand always fluctuate, we do tend to have a lot of available fellowship slots at this time. Future's always uncertain, but the best general strategy right now for market uncertainty is to diversify your applications. So I think the not putting all of your eggs in one basket rule applies here as in many areas of life. So things you might want to consider. Look at the geographic locations. Think about what specialties you're looking at. Some of those programs get more applicants than others. The VA has attempted to develop training programs in smaller locations. One of the things we're looking to do is develop professional pipelines and train our future colleagues. And so if you are willing and able, considering geographically out of the way places is a great option for competing for really high quality training, as well as maybe some of the fellowships in larger cities and at VAs that people are more familiar with. In terms of clinical specialties within VA, neuropsychology is likely to be the most competitive subfield. The number of postdocs has increased, so the odds of you being able to secure those fellowship positions has also increased. So especially with good preparation and some geographic flexibility, we encourage you to pursue those opportunities if that is something you want. So the next logical question is, how competitive am I and how many postdocs should I actually apply to? This is kind of a hard question and tends to be very individualized. So rather than give you an answer, I'm going to suggest that you start by talking with your advisors, your internship training director. Talk to the classmates that were a year or so ahead of you. Generally speaking, you would not need to apply to as many postdoc programs as you did for internship. I know that one of the things I've always encouraged people to do is kind of look for that brass ring fellowship or two, the ones that you would go anywhere to get, and definitely apply. Don't sell yourself short. You might find that you're really competitive for a position that you feel like might be a little bit out of reach, but also look geographically, look at, again, a range of programs, and recognize that the fellowship application process is a lot different. And I think Dr. Siegel is going to speak to this, but while we have the initial application phase, there are opportunities ongoing after that initial round of applications. So there's some flexibility built in. So to summarize, I'm going to say look at a range of programs, especially a range of geographical areas. And I don't know if other people on the call want to speak to this real quickly now, since I know this is sort of a hot topic for many people on the call. Did I get it right? All right, I'm seeing nods.
I'd vote yes. I would just add to really think about what your goals are when you're applying for a postdoc. So if you have, sometimes people have geographic limitations, or they're really pressed about applying for a particular emphasis area or something like that. All of those things are going to really be important factors. I'm in Dallas. If I feel like I have to stay in Dallas, then I should probably apply for every postdoc in Dallas. To try to increase the odds that I'm able to meet that criteria, if that's what's important to you. So really paying attention to what your goals are and how flexible you're willing to be to pursue those training objectives.
I would just add to agree with Kristin about it is a different market than internship. Sometimes I felt like people have maybe over applied for postdoc because they remember what it was like applying for internship. So you can probably take it down a little bit of a notch as far as that goes, but definitely kind of agreed with the general advice.
Thank you for chiming in. Next, I want to speak a little bit about VA culture. For those of you who are not currently at a VA internship and who may be less familiar with what being in a VA is like, I think you'll find that there are a lot of people on this call. There are going to be some themes. I know Dr. Silberbogen said some things I'm inclined to repeat, and others may do similarly. But the VA is this huge healthcare system, but we are extremely mission driven. Our mission includes training and research, so this is a top priority. It's not an aftersight. But the main role is providing healthcare to America's veterans. And I think what you'll find is there is a significant commitment and sense of purpose that's a little bit different than in other environments, certainly that I've worked in. If you want to train in VA, I think it's important to have an interest in veterans and understanding their perspectives and values. As was commented on, it's a heterogeneous group, but there are also common themes. So people's military service is an important aspect of identity. That is an important cultural and diversity factor. And people's military experience may have both positive and negative aspects that influence their identity, both at the same time. Sometimes applicants worry that they might be challenged by veterans as civilians. I would encourage you not to be concerned about that. By showing interest, being respectful, being willing to learn. Veterans tend to be very responsive, even if you're not as familiar with their background and training as you might want to be. Pretty much all of our programs will provide education about military culture and help you with some assimilation and language and those kinds of things. So I assure you, we will help you along to feel comfortable in that role. Some important traits in trainees, things like diligence, reliability, accountability. You have to remember that these positions are funded by taxpayers. So there's, again, a sense of extra responsibility that might seem different than other environments. And with that comes at times a little bit of rigidity that people may not be as familiar with. For example, our tour of duty tends to be very fixed. So the expectation is very much that you are here at or before your scheduled time and that you are here until the very end of your day. Another thing I would encourage people thinking about our culture is staying focused and being professional. If you do that, you should not be affected by political issues. I know there can be a lot of anxiety about that, especially at these times. But I assure you that our mission remains consistent. And I think one of the things I do at my program is always say is, you know, how does this benefit the veteran? And if we keep the veterans at the center of the decisions we make, a lot of the other things going on in the world kind of fall away. At the same time, watching psychologists advocate within a large and complex system can be very stimulating. So in a fellowship, I think you'll find there's lots of opportunities to see how we navigate in the system and how we work with and for veterans. Engaging in the VA culture is important, both with actions and sort of respect and kind of values. Many trainees are surprised by how meaningful the work that they do here is, and I'm grateful to say that many folks stay, which is really consistent with our goals for training, since we are definitely working to train our future colleagues. Regarding the quality of healthcare, I'll say VA provides superior or equal care on all major variables at lower costs. This is consistently true across national standards. Leadership and dissemination of evidence-based practices, healthcare research, and analytics are all key factors that VA puts at the forefront all the time. I know Dr. Silberbogen spoke to this, but I'll also say in terms of the culture, VA has many psychologists in leadership positions, including in training, but also within mental health programs, but also at the executive leadership level and at the national office level. There are lots and lots of opportunities to grow within this system, both as a trainee, but also as a staff psychologist. So I think you'll find that the VA is just a really exciting place to be a part of. And with that, I will offer the time to Dr. Holohan.
Sorry about that. Thanks. As just to follow up on some of the things that have already been highlighted about the differences between applying for internship and postdoc, one of the things you're looking for on internship is obviously a fit. But on postdoc, that's even more emphasized. And part of the reason for that is that you don't have to do a postdoc. You can go and get a job, and it's less. There's less pressure to have to match. And also, a lot of postdocs you'll find, if it's not a good fit, will choose to not match with someone. They'll be very selective. So finding that good fit is really important in this process. Now, figuring out what that good fit is may take a little bit of some adventuring. So there's some lovely things to look for in maybe where you applied for internship and postdoc brochures, figuring out what a site emphasizes, what their values are and what their preferences are, and looking for, are the experiences the reason why you're choosing to do a postdoc, because it is a choice to do a postdoc, if that site would actually help complement the things that you're looking for and advance you towards the career that you're most interested in. So does the site actually offer the experiences that you'd like? And does the site actually value the things that are most important to you? If you heavily value scientist practitioner model, does that site allow you to do research and research in the area that you want to develop your expertise in further? So trying to figure out if that is actually a fit through published materials is important, and then your past experiences as well. The other part is thinking about if it feels like a good fit, how do you communicate that? And a lot of times we'll be asked about what makes someone a competitive candidate. In fact, in the question and answer chat today, there's a lot of questions about that. Do I have to have done research? How much research should I have done before? Or do I have to have done an internship at a VA to make me competitive? I think it's important, if those things are true, certainly to highlight those, but also thinking about being explicit in your cover letter about the things you are bringing to the table that do, in your opinion, make you an exceptional fit for that site. And then why, in particular, that site do you think is a particular fit for you? So what is it that it's going to do to help you along and advance your career? And a lot of times cover letters are missed opportunities to be able to speak to that fit. So to me, that's really one of the most important parts of an application, is really making that argument and making that explicit. Now, sometimes people will also ask about, should they apply to more than one emphasis area at one site, and how they can make an argument about fit if you're applying to more than one position. I think that is tricky. And in particular, you don't want the only fit to seem that it's just a geographic one, although that can be an appeal to think, okay, I'm interested in moving to this area. Most sites are really interested in making sure that the match of the staff and your interests and with the applicant is really important. So if you do choose to apply to more than one emphasis area at a site, really spending time making it clear why in particular each of those tracks is important and might be a really good fit for you. All right, in the interest of time, I know we have two others.
Dana, you muted yourself.
Muted.
Okay, well,
I'm going to turn that over to Joel.
okay, well, thanks, Dana. So hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. So just to tell you about myself, I was a training director for many years, and recently I moved to the Office of Academic Affiliations. And I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and talk about the section that I now work for, which is called the Advanced Fellowship section, because I think it might offer some training opportunities that might be a little bit off the beaten path, but really good opportunities for psychology trainees. So our section we have 21 different programs at 50 facilities across the country. And it's really advanced training in either clinical areas of specialty that are of emphasis to the VA, such as addiction, psychosocial rehabilitation, women's health, geriatrics, traumatic brain injury, things like that, or specialized skills such as health service research, quality improvement, data science, system redesign, things like that. And the reason it's a little bit off the beaten path is because these were originally designed as physician post-residency training programs. So physicians would complete all of their clinical training, and then they would get this advanced specialization. Well, now it's open to many professions, and psychology really has become one of our major professions. And so that's why I really wanted to talk about it here. And so I just want to mention a couple of things about that. First of all, so our biggest program is mental illness research and treatment, which Dr. Beaudrea is going to be talking about in just a minute. But I wanted to mention some of the other big ones that we have: health services research, advanced geriatrics, women's health, again, psychosocial rehabilitation, and addictions. And then there's several others that are kind of less populated with psychology trainees, but most of them are eligible. Psychologists are eligible for most of those. So if you look at the PowerPoint slide to kind of start us off today, there was some websites. The psychologytraining.va.gov is where all the psychology programs are listed. And at the very bottom of that page, there's the Advanced Fellowship web page. And so would encourage you, if you have any interest in some of these topics that I've talked about, to go take a look at it. The easiest thing to do is just to go to the web page, read the programs we have. You can also sort by the location where they are, where you might want to be. And some of them have more formalized websites. Others just essentially have a page and a contact information. So I'd encourage you to just reach out to the program director that's listed there. And again, it's not designed in a psychology-centric way. I'm hoping to make some changes in that. So sometimes there might be some incorrect information about psychology licensure, which of course is very important for people considering a postdoctoral fellowship. And some are kind of inaccurately stating that you have to be a licensed psychologist to start there. And in most cases, that is not true. But again, it does take a little bit of extra homework on your part just to kind of find out about that. So the best thing to do is to reach out to the program director, or if you have any questions, you want to reach out to me, that would be great as well. Some of the programs are very well integrated with their local facilities, other psychology training programs, and so they're very formalized when it comes to things like the match and so forth. and others are not. So again, it's kind of individualized. But I'm just hoping that you'll take a look at that because it's a great fit for psychology, and we'd love to have more psychology trainees in our advanced fellowships. And so with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Beaudrea. I think you're still muted.
It doesn't look like she's muted, but we don't have sound.
Should I go and we can come back to Sherry? Yeah, shaking. All right. I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to, and we can come back while she's sorting out her audio problems. I'm going to talk about navigating the selection process, and I'm going to share my screen while I'm doing that. Hold on one second. Okay, so in thinking about postdoctoral selection, the first thing to understand is how it's very different from internship selection. And because postdoc is very, the heterogeneity of postdoctoral programs is really vast. There's many different types of programs in terms of specialties, areas of focus, the amount of research that's being done, how they may be eligible for licensure in certain states and jurisdictions. And so there really is great variability in that area. So it's important to understand that. Along with that, there is no match with internship. It's profoundly different than having a match. There are postdoctoral selection guidelines which have tried to help organize the process. And there's other things that we have done to kind of organize the process. I would add, in addition to the roles that I have that were noted when the introductions were done, I also chair APIC's postdoctoral committee. And a lot of the resources that I'm going to show you are things that APIC has done in order to help organize the process. BA programs have benefited significantly, I think, from that as well. So there's no match, the selection guidelines. With that, you have a lot more autonomy as an applicant. You don't have all the rules that are bound by the internship match. So you have autonomy, you're bound by good professional ethics, and programs the same thing. There are no match rules that they're bound to. There are those selection guidelines that programs are voluntarily deciding to follow. There are some programs that do not follow them. I would also add that clinical neuropsychology programs and very research-focused programs are not bound to the guidelines either. So I have sharing my screen. This is APIC's postdoc webpage, and there's a lot of resources here that will be very helpful in learning about and navigating through the selection process. So note the web link here. If you just go to APIC's main page, hover over postdoc, click on it, it will bring you to that menu item, and you can, all the resources are here. All those resources are also below. The first that I would point out as being important is signing up for APIC's postdoc mail list. That's where a lot of information comes out around postdoctoral training. You'll get from myself, APIC, and other members of the postdoctoral committee, a link to the selection guidelines, and they're kind of detailed in terms of what is the process, how it is navigated. Encourage people to take a very close look at those as well also. Within the guidelines, there are resources. We have graphic timelines that we have developed that are, so for applicants, it would be applicants for clinically focused programs, neuropsych programs, research-focused programs. Some of those timelines can be different in terms of when do you need to do what. The more informed that you are about the process, the more successful you're going to be in navigating it, and the less stressful the process is going to be. You also, here's a link where my cursor is. There's a spreadsheet that you can download. And I'm not going to open that right now, but it has a lot of variables that are very important as you consider and weigh postdoctoral programs Kristin had talked about match. And so these are things that will also often help you determine, is that program a good match for you? And then also timelines may be different in terms of when deadlines are, letters are due, interviews are being done, and it can help you keep track of all of those things as well. Within the APIC selection guidelines, there is a uniform notification date for this selection season. It's February 22nd, 21. But there is this process called Reciprocal Offers, and it's highlighted in the guidelines. But this is a special document that runs through a range of scenarios that help clarify what you can do and can't do around reciprocal offers. Again, looking through that document can be really useful in helping to understand the process. One of the things that would be useful to point out, and I'm only going to open one of these, is the timelines for programs, and this is for clinically focused programs. So the timelines are here. It kind of goes through what you need to be thinking about or doing it first at various steps in the process. And a lot of the resources that I just noted are hyperlinked within this document. So again, take a look at those as you consider the process. So I'm going to back up a little bit here. Also want to point out there are resources down here on the page about educational resources for postdoctoral selection. There is a narrated PowerPoint that we've developed that kind of goes through a lot of the information we're talking about right now in pretty significant detail. Would encourage people to take the time to go through that. Your internship directors may be going through that with you, but you can certainly do that on your own time. We are also doing a series of webinars around postdoctoral selection process. One was last week, and the next one coming up is actually a week from today, from 6 to 7:15 Central Time. If you click on this link, there is a way to sign up for that webinar to participate. It's open to 500 applicants, so they should not fill up. And then we have another PowerPoint that was developed that was more geared for people just before they're applying to the process. There's still a lot of good information if you want to take a look at that. The other last thing that I will note is an attempt to kind of help organize or standardize some of the process. APIC has developed APICAS, which is a standardized postdoctoral application process. Not all programs use it, some programs use it. There is a standard kind of base application that all kind of core information that all programs want. And then each program has a separate kind of portal where they might request supplemental information or things that are unique to that program. And so the application process is very different from internship. So with the API for internship, it's standardized. There's kind of one size that kind of fits for all programs. But for postdoc, it can be very different in terms of what the program is asking. So if people have process questions about the process, there is contact information through all the timelines, so people can call, email, and be happy to kind of respond to any of that. So with that, I want to turn it back over to the group, and hopefully Dr. Beaudrea has
hoping it works.
Yes.
It does. Oh, good. I can hang up the phone. I had the two options here. Okay, I hung up the phone. I'm glad you can hear me. I'll keep it brief. There's such a wealth of information for folks. I want to just mention it's interesting being on the end of it, and others may attest to this as well, being in a director position where many of us have done our training, many aspects of our training in VA. I know for myself, I was a research assistant for graduate school at a VA. I was an extern at a VA. I did my internship and then postdoc at a VA. So, but you don't have to do all of those steps necessarily to be in VA. For the VA Advanced Fellowship in Mental Illness Research and Treatment, I'll just give a little bit of information about the structure and give you additional information. Dr. Schmidt gave some information about the Advanced Fellowship website, and that's a great resource. Ours is included on there. The best resource, and I'll just tell you from the start, if you would like to find out information about individual sites, would be to contact me. And I'm simply sherry.beaudrea@va.gov. And I will get you connected with the information you need. We can find out a little bit about your interests. The Advanced Fellowship in Mental Illness Research and Treatment is a clinical research fellowship program. And it's unique in a number of ways, which is one of the reasons I actually I graduated from that program myself. I'm a researcher. And what's nice about the program, it's unique from many other research programs in which 75% of the fellows' time is spent in clinical research and 25% of their time is in direct service delivery or direct patient contact. And there may be, usually there's a quite a bit substantial amount of patient contact in the research that we do. It's also a nice mix because you also can, for those of you who want to do research, but also would like to get licensed in psychology, that is supported at a number of our sites. I'm actually not aware of a single site where that's not supported. We have 28 sites nationally, and they are represented at different centers of excellence. We have the MyRex are the most common ones that we have. When our program started, it was just MyRex, but over since 2009 actually was expanded out to some other centers. The MyRex are the Mental Illness Research, Education, and Clinical Centers. They're also national centers for PTSD and other centers that are represented. And the goal of these fellowships are to really train kind of the next generation of both MDs and PhDs. So each site gets an MD and a PhD. It's a 2-year fellowship with an optional and competitive 3rd-year fellowship. And really the focus is on high priority areas of veteran mental health research. So for instance, suicide, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use disorders and comorbidities, serious mental illness, aging, which is my area, post-deployment mental health, some with traumatic brain injury, usually in combination with maybe mental health concerns. We have different sites and we can kind of direct you which sites have those areas of focus if that's an interest for you. We have another unique aspect of our program is that we have a national didactic that runs a good part of the year from October to June. And this is available to all of our fellows at all of our sites. It's a coordinated didactic focusing on different areas of professional development for academia. The goal of our fellowship program is really to prepare fellows not only in really refining their scientific writing, but also in writing grants. And we have, for some of our data that we have from over the years, 3/4 of fellows who've graduated from our programs have either gone on to do for a VA position that was either research and clinical, or possibly clinical 100%, or other leadership positions in VA or academia. So if you're on the path of either academia or planning to stay in VA, particularly to do research, that might be a good fit for you. And I can't read some of my notes here. There was Dr. Silberbogen, I think you mentioned science drives care and training in VA. And I think our program is a really, we feel it's a really important aspect of that kind of planning and helping the next generation in science in VA. So I'll stop there, but would love to, if there are questions about the program, I'm very happy to answer those over email, even just to connect folks with sites. I'm glad you could hear me.
I'm noticing there's a question in the chat box about kind of accommodations about regarding COVID-19. I don't know if anybody wants to take that. Go ahead, Wayne. Thanks.
In the UPPD, which I actually didn't go through, I'm surprised I forgot, is the Universal Psychology Directory. There is information where programs are asked to kind of update what their training is going to be or how it may be different. Now that may be challenging for programs to anticipate for the fall of next year what things are going to look like. But I would encourage, as you maybe interview at sites, to kind of ask those questions. You can even reach out to the training director. There is a field in the UPPD that is where programs are indicating their preference for interviews, whether they're doing exclusive virtual interviews, preferred virtual interviews, or whether it's just an option. And so you can kind of get a sense of what would be required from that respect. It was mentioned earlier that postdoc is there are more postdoctoral programs than applicants. Also, postdoctoral programs tend to maybe interview less applicants per slot. That may not be universal for every program, but it certainly is a trend. And so you're kind of much more competitive through that process. And so it is perfectly okay if you are interested in the program, reach out to the training director, ask these type of questions about what accommodations maybe they have done. This may come up in the interview process, but you can certainly ask beforehand as well.
I just wanted to make a point about this too, if I could, because it really varies a lot by program. And so not so much the selection process, but the actual work that you do. I think that, it's been a challenge, obviously, to kind of go virtual so suddenly back in the spring. But I think part of the challenge is that, this is an experiential training process, right? So you have to actually kind of do work. And so it's been a great opportunity for telehealth, but I know there's also some clinical care that really happens in person. And so it really is somewhat individualized. And, I know everyone around the country is doing their best to kind of blend those complexities, but I think it has to be an individual conversation with the programs that you're looking at. There's not there's really not a broad statement that you can make about how virtual it's going to be.
And maybe this is a good time thinking about VA culture too, to explain that while there are certain national directives and themes that are going to be consistent across VAs, there's a lot of variability from one local site to another. And how we're managing the pandemic is a perfect example of how that happens and why that happens. So if you are in a certain area that's a hot spot for a pandemic, appropriate precautions in that medical center may look very different than a VA in an environment with very, very low rates of COVID-19 right now. And so I think the amount of teleworking versus on-site but virtual really does look different, both across VAs, but also maybe across time. So what we're doing today might look different than what we will be doing in 2 months. And so I guess I'd like to speak as a VA psychologist that has watched an extremely rapid transition and a pretty impressive responsiveness. There's a lot of infrastructure built to provide telehealth and virtual services. And so I'm going to concur, ask individual program directors, but also say this is a way to understand how the VA functions.
We did a survey of our directors to find out what types of changes they had made in response to COVID and what percentage of our fellows were, how much of their time was remote. And I think the majority, they were 100% remote, but there were some where they were still maybe going in. So you're absolutely right. I mean, even for the clinical research, there are sometimes situations where they might be going in for some of their time. But for the most part, a lot of the research has become remote, or certain activities are not even permitted, I know, at RVA, but again, it might vary site to site, so, yeah.
I also think there are a lot of clinical programs where trainees may be on site, but providing their services predominantly virtually. And certainly nobody's being asked to provide services without appropriate PPE and attention to the utmost safety for everyone involved, especially our trainees. So I will speak for my fellow training directors and say that that is something that we are talking about as a community, we are concerned about, and we are paying a lot of attention to.
There was a question in the messaging about remote postdocs, about providing living in one state. And I don't believe anyone's really addressed that yet. But within VA, that is a problem because trainees can't provide services across state lines. And then in general, you could run into issues with jurisdiction and licensure, even if it was possible within VA to be able to do that. So that's generally not an option, or not generally not, it is not an option within VA programs. and it's often not an option for non-dual programs.
Hopefully people on the call are sort of monitoring the Q&As. I know that there were also a whole lot of questions pertinent to who writes letters of recommendation. So I don't know if we just want to speak to that broadly. I think that the critical answer is you want to have letters of recommendation that reflect the work you've done and represent your training in the recent years. So I think some of the things that came up is making sure that if research is a core component of the fellowship you're applying to and the work you've been doing, then you probably want a letter from a research supervisor. Certainly want at least one good letter from your internship program, and probably should have some from your graduate work as well, since that's where you've spent a bulk of your time. Anybody on a selection committee where we see big gaps, like why isn't anyone speaking to the person's time that they spent in this huge part of their training, may see that as a potential red flag. And so you don't want to leave those holes in your application. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that, but I think that's sort of a good broad strategy for when you're thinking about who can write letters. I also tell my trainees, think not only about who knows you the best and thinks the most highly of you, but who's going to write the best letter. Someone may think you're great and know you really well, but if they aren't going to write you a good, strong letter, then that might not be the best person to ask. So that's always worthy of consideration as well. Sometimes what I tell people to ask is, would you be willing to write me a letter, and do you have time to write a good letter for me this year?
Programs will often in their materials tell you what type of individuals they want letters from, whether they want it from a research preceptor, an internship supervisor, or a mixture of that. And so pay attention if that is specific in the instructions for applying to this particular program.
I think that's a really good point. Paying attention to materials and following the directions is not a waste of your time. We notice when you don't. So strongly encourage, both in terms of letters, but all of the rest of the application instructions as well.
So there was a question about Payne fellowships for advanced fellowships. Joel, I don't know if you wanted to respond to that. It's in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I did respond to that.
Oh, you did respond. Oh, this. Okay.
Yeah. So we don't have a specific advanced fellowship in chronic pain, but of course there's a lot of great psychology programs that do have great training in that area.
And I am aware of, I mean, within the mental illness research and treatment advanced fellowship program, we've had fellows with that particular interest, and they were combining it with maybe looking at pain and post-traumatic stress disorder, or so that could fit with some of the research interests at particular sites potentially.
Some VA programs that have specialties in rehabilitation psychology offer rotations or focus in pain within that. I would add Minneapolis as one of those. So you can search the UPVD for rehab psychology, or you could just search in the general text for pain and see kind of what comes up. And you can also filter any of your searches by VA programs if you don't narrow down specifically.
Want to answer that last question about CBT, or I'm also noticing the time?
I think the impression that if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. I think CBT is very common since there's a focus on impaired-based practices, but I think there's lots of training in different modalities across different programs. Dana, you're muted, I think.
Several VAs have training in IPT for depression as well.
It's possible for some fellows, depending on the evidence-based treatment program, they sometimes allow for postdoctoral fellows to get training as part of those programs. So that could be something to ask about if you interview, if they have a precedent for that at certain sites.
All right, I know we're close to time, so just wanted to take it back to Tiffany. Tiffany, if you're still there, any last minute closing remarks, either from yourself or for any of the other panelists?
No, I just want to thank everybody again, especially the panelists, for your expertise and taking the time to share with us some tips and really good information about applying to VA postdocs, and hopefully you'll consider applying this year to our VA postdoctoral fellowship programs. I will be following up with everyone who registered for the webinar today with a link to the recording. So if you want to watch it again or share with your peers, you're welcome to do so. And thank you all for taking the time to join this webinar today. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck on the process.
Yeah.
Yes, wish you well.